Time to go live on another bicycle live stream at 7:14 a.m. on Sunday, November the 29th, the second last day of spring in the Southern Hemisphere. I've ridden 43 kilometres, beautiful ride this morning, been on the bike since 4:30 and heading home with the wind behind me, thank goodness. Alright, this morning's topic, bit of an interesting one. Abolitionist vegans versus compassionate vegans. What is the difference? Well, let me tell you a little bedtime story. Now, up until about 10 years ago, I first heard of the term abolitionists about 10 years ago, and really didn't know much about what an abolitionist vegan was about. Still don't. Anyway, but I came across the path of a couple of abolitionists, and in fact I want to tell you a little story that sort of introduced me to their thinking and some of their behavioural patterns and the way they deal with other people. So about 9 or 10 years ago now, when I came across a very nice guy, actually, very gentle, well-spoken, intelligent vegan who was running a meetup group, and myself and my wife at the time became very good friends with him and helped him out running events on the Gold Coast. And so we got to know him, and he was fine. He was a nice guy, really nice guy, still is. And we got along well with him. And I could certainly relate to a lot of what he was saying. I didn't have an issue there. I mean, my interpretation of abolition is it's an it comes from an all or nothing understanding. It's black and white. It's either you're vegan or you're not. You're doing it or you're not. You're either supporting animal rights or you're not. And, I could relate to that. I'm an all or nothing person in a lot of the ways that I do things, so I could relate to that. I thought that was fine. But it was the other parts that I started to notice. And what would happen was we'd have new people come along to the group, come along for a meal, and I noticed he'd be in conversation with them. He would especially be talking to new people, trying to educate them on the importance of animal rights. And interestingly, we wouldn't see them again, And I'm generalising here. We had new people come along that stayed, but we'd have enough new people come along that wouldn't come along again for me to sort of think, or to notice it. So. And then what happened was I noticed I had a couple of comments, that's right, from people. I had a couple of comments from people that were saying, is so-and-so coming along, the abolitionist? Will he be coming along? Because he's, it's his group. And I'd say, oh, no, he's not coming. That's great. They're great. We'll come along then. We don't want to come along if he's coming along. And I thought, wow, people have such a problem with his approach, which was really interesting because he is such a kind, well-spoken person. This was my introduction to how abolitionists, as well-meaning as they may be, lack an approach, or they don't come across as approachable, and they rub people up the wrong way, and that pushes people away, and unfortunately doesn't achieve the goal of animal rights at all. Pushes people away. They're like, oh, I don't want to have anything to do with this, So that was the first example I saw of that. Since then, I've come across other examples. Same thing. The same structured thinking with something that is, the real big problem is highly critical. A high level of criticism. Now, this criticism originates from and I'll say this jokingly, from their guru, Gary Francione, or Francione, however you want to pronounce his name. But he is not the starter. He didn't start vegan abolitionism, but he sort of claimed it as his own. And is well known. You can Google him and do some research. Well known for being highly critical of just about everyone that isn't him. Just about every other vegan organisation, every technique or tactic that they're using. You know, there's not much that he's not critical of, which really does lend myself to think that there's a very strong projection there of a lack of inner peace. So anyway, it's interesting to know that Gary is a very poor example of abolitionists, vegan abolitionists. If you want a good example, I suggest you research Tom Regan, who passed away 3 years ago. Tom Regan is a very well-spoken, very intelligent vegan abolitionist who came before Gary, wrote about 4 books, I think. One in the 80s being, I think early 80s. I think it was called, what was it? It was... I know the term animal rights was in the title, but I think, but anyway, you'd have to research it. Now, Tom is a delight to watch in his lecturing. He was a university professor, and he knew, intelligent enough, compassionate enough to know that if you criticize someone, you're not going to get the best out of them. If you criticize the person directly or the organisation that that person is connected with, they are going to take offence to it. It is basic human nature. It is not an intelligent means of communication by any means. And because of what I've personally seen, it just doesn't work. He knew that. He is very well respected. See if I can get through these lights. Here we go. Giving it all. All right, got through. He is well respected because he treated people with compassion. Now, ironically, this is Tom Regan I'm talking about, not Gary. Ironically, some of the abolitionists I know actually take offence to using the word compassion. And now, every once in a while, I will have a conversation with someone where I am so floored by what they say, so dumbfounded that I'm speechless. And I think this fits into that category, where I've spoken to an abolitionist and they've taken offence to using the word compassion, and I've stood there with my mouth open going, this does not compute. Need time to process this. You have ceased to make sense. And it really is... it's like compassion is the foundation of veganism, of animal rights. That's where it comes from. It comes from our natural, inherent compassion of the heart. It doesn't come from the head, it comes from the heart. The problem, the case for animal rights, thank you, Michelle, thank you. That was Tom Regan's book in 83, I think that one came out, and he did another 3 after that. Thank you. The book was called The Case for Animal Rights. Thank you. Okay, so it's as wonderful as it is to intellectualize animal rights. Starting point, the reason why we do it doesn't come from an intellectual point. It comes from a natural compassion in our heart that we have with us always. There we go, lost signal for a second then. So just to repeat what I was saying, it comes from our need to treat all living beings with respect, with compassion, to honour the rights of all living beings to live free from harm, free from suffering, for them to have a freedom, a life and a love. All of that comes from our natural compassion in our heart. It comes from love. It is a component of love. Now we can put it in our mind and intellectualize it like somebody like Gary has done, and then we just get buried in layers of confusion, basically, taking us away from a very simple way of living our life. I'm a very simple person. And when I start to, get involved with these people that are bringing up all these concepts and ideas, I'm just like, wow, you've just taken me away from the simplicity of the matter. That is, it is something that comes from my heart. It's just that simple. And you've taken me away from it. Can I make these lights? No, I can't. Gave it a good shot. So this is a very, very important point. So, okay, moving on from there. So to Tom Regan's credit, he understands the inherent right to life as he describes it. And this understanding, which he describes, or he speaks so much more clearly and more compassionately about than Gary, is the, this inherent right to life is what we know in our heart to be the right thing. It is the definition, or it fits into the definition of compassion. So what we need to ask is, what is the difference then between an abolitionist and a compassionate vegan? And that difference is, for me, I define it as one's coming from the head and one's coming from the heart. And this tends to mean that people that just know that it is the right thing to do from their heart tend to sort of come up against an opposing force that wants to intellectualize it, and unfortunately in intellectualizing it wants to then become critical of things that don't fit into their black and white all or nothing paradigm. And there are many examples of this in the abolitionist movement, but the bottom line is its lack of effectiveness, its lack of achieving what it's trying to achieve, which is animal rights. If you want to talk about the massive change, the massive awareness that's happened in animal rights and vegan awareness in, say, the last decade, you're not going to be talking about it from the perspective of something that Gary's achieved, because most people that hear of Gary Francione at first become interested and read a bit about him and follow him, and then after a while they just get pushed away because it's just not comfortable to be around someone that's always critical. None of us want to be in that situation. That's not coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of fear. It's coming from the opposite of love. So what works? Well, what I've seen work over the years is treating people with compassion, asking them questions, meeting them where they're at, and then lifting them up from there. Not coming along and basically saying, what you're doing is wrong, you have to go vegan now. It doesn't work. The person goes, and excuse me for swearing, the person goes, don't tell me what to do, fuck off. It doesn't work. And the proof of the pudding is in the dismal results that the abolitionists get and the amount of hatred that is generated towards them. Now, it's not the only process that doesn't work, so I'm not just singling them out. Let's be aware that going into, say, restaurants where people are eating their meals of cooked corpses and telling them that meat is murder, how many vegans have been created out of that? The percentage is, well, statistically, the percentage is almost zero, because when they've done surveys, this is what they've found. It doesn't work. You can't do it. Psychologically, backfires. It's the dumbest thing you can do, is telling someone what they're doing is wrong. It just gets their false ego in a defense mode, and they won't listen to you from that point onwards. There's nothing intelligent about that approach. So what does work? Documentaries. The most, in surveys of what created awareness for somebody to go vegan, documentaries are number one. They're the most cited reason, because they don't come in and criticize you. A documentary comes in and says, did you know this? you know, this is what the research is showing. This is, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's actually, it's a technique I like to use. You know, people are talking and I'm talking to somebody and they're giving information about why eggs are necessary or something like that. Now, I'm not going to criticize them. I'm just going to say, hey, did you know that eggs are actually high in cholesterol and are actually not particularly healthy? Did you know that? You know, so what I'm doing is just giving information like a documentary. If they take that offense to that, that's, you know, it's pretty hard to get around that one. So, okay, and the second most important thing that works in reaching out to people is on the personal level, friends and family. When you reach out to people from that level, they tend to listen. They tend to value what you're saying way more than a stranger in the street. So that's the two big things if we want to actually achieve animal rights. So I'll keep it brief. I hope that's you know, helped you out there in a little bit of the understanding between abolitionist vegans and compassionate vegans. May we always be compassionate. May we always come from the heart. And may you always live vegan and save lives. Ahimsa.